Walmart is the largest retailer on Earth. Their stores cover more land than the island of Manhattan. That area is made up of Sam's Clubs, supercenters, Walmarts, discount centers, and neighborhood markets. That Manhattan-sized building area doesn't even count their vast distribution centers, or other properties like its corporate campus in Bentonville, Arkansas, or associated ones like the Crystal Bridges Museum in American Art.
But even though that they cover so much of the Earth, we use them all the time without notice. 60% of the entire US population lives within 5 miles of a Walmart location, and 96% are within 20 miles. That's all to say that Walmart controls a huge share of the built environment, which over the decades has evolved based on Walmart's interest to be fully optimized for the distribution of goods and the generation of capital. At the same time, it's curious that Walmart stores are almost invisible to us, or even if they're not, it's likely that most of us don't know what goes into them or why they are the way that they are. And that's why I think it's important to take a closer look to understand how this vast network of enclosed spaces are shaping our world.
This is the design of Walmart. Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, purchased his first discount retail variety store, then called Ben Franklin, in Newport, Arkansas in 1945. Its success allowed him to purchase another in 1950, which they renamed Walton's Five and Dime. Walton's success in generating profits with these pre-existing stores led him to expand in 1962 with the first new store, now named Walmart, and within another 5 years, there were 24 of them. It's here, even at the very beginning, where the store design really begins to distinguish itself as something unique. Back in 1950, that store was, according to Sam Walton, only the third store in the country that followed a self-service retail model. While this is basically how we shop now, Walton took unparalleled advantage of the opportunities that this shift in operations offered. Prior to the self-service format, customers would not handle merchandise prior to its purchase. This was called a full-service store or market. A customer would enter the space where merchandise would be on display, and they would instruct a clerk on which items to compile. Items for sale were located behind a counter, always under surveillance, and only within the reach of the clerk. Once the process of shopping was complete, the clerk would tally the cost, complete the sale, hand over the items, and the customer would be on their way. But with the self-service model, customers would enter a turnstile and once inside, peruse all the wares at their leisure. Everything could be handled directly beforehand. When the shopper was through, they'd bring their chosen items to the clerk, who stayed near the register, and from there things are pretty familiar. This reconfiguration of the shopping experience has a few important ramifications. Firstly, the clerk no longer has to specifically help each customer for the duration of their time in the store. Their interaction is reduced to just the time at the register. This saves on the overall operating cost for the store, allowing them to charge less for goods across the board. Secondly, the full-service format required lots of space that didn't directly serve the customer. Around 50% of the space in these stores would have been used for storage and other back-of-house activities. Thirdly, customers could easily compare products to each other prior to purchase, instead of the store offering one version of everything. Now stores that were able to offer options would allow customers to make choices between similar products. Customers can compare costs or other qualities that are important to them. This pushes the responsibility to brands more generally to directly appeal to the customer in ways that weren't so important before. This completely shifts the relationship between the customer, the store, the products, and the brands.
It's very soft, it's absorbent, it's economical, it's reasonably soft.
Both of these conditions are important to Walmart and much of retail today. In fact, Walmart has often been accused of leveraging their influence to force brands to lower their prices to the point that profit becomes impossible for them.
But anyway, in these early days, for brand identity of the store itself to carry between one location and another, it was actually the role of display furniture, which could be consistent between the different kinds of structures. So while the buildings themselves may have looked very different, it was the interior and a set of specifically designed shelves and displays that made a Walmart what it was.
This idea that a store is about its interior and also not just a single entity but part of a larger network of spaces is crucial to understanding the overall ethos of Walmart. As a result, they've created a vast network of connected interior spaces across the United States. When you count an interior of a truck as a sort of moving room, it's possible for an item to travel from one interior to another, never seeing the outside until a customer emerges through those exit doors.
As more items and options filled the shelves and more stores were built, In 1970, Walmart developed their own distribution system to replace the deliveries from individual vendors to each location. Today, these are huge spaces of millions of square feet or more, and they fill up and empty 90% of their contents every single day. By controlling the movement of goods, coupled with the ability to gather and process the data around where these goods should go and when, Walmart saves money in all sorts of areas and can provide products to customers that wouldn't be able to have encountered them otherwise. It's actually this system of distribution centers that govern the locations of each Walmart store. With the first located in Arkansas, originally to service the pre-existing stores, they built outward concentrically from there, with each new store never more than a day's drive from a distribution center. Stores need to be near enough to one another so deliveries are not too time-consuming, but far enough apart so each store doesn't cannibalize the sales of the others. Other factors driving locations of stores are local demographics and population growth. Walmart attempts to build stores at strategic locations in anticipation of its territory growing into it.
But it's not just the efficient distribution of goods which makes Walmart tick. The flow of information is just as important to the decisions that the corporation makes about its physical makeup.
Walmart developed the largest private network of satellites to help develop tools for determining where stores should go. After construction, every single store also has a satellite dish on its roof for exchanging data and communicating with the corporate administration back in Arkansas. Because everything runs from the central command center in Arkansas, yet they build on average a new store every other day, they've had to develop unique solutions to the design and construction process. And to be clear, they don't deliver unique solutions. In fact, Walton was quoted saying, "We just started repeating what worked, stamping out stores cookie cutter style. The only decision we had to make was the size and format to put in what market." This use of the term format is interesting because it refers to the kind of store, whether it's a supercenter or a Sam's Club and so on. In fact, Walmart doesn't even call its stores buildings. It's referred to by its format and then labeled prototype and a number. These formats and prototypes are only really defined by their interior configurations of goods and displays. This tracks from even the earliest days of the company's history. Within these formats are precise arrangements of things like impulse areas, the space around a checkout counter, or stores within stores, where an entire area is a different look and feel, maybe with different carpet or lighting like in the electronics area. The interior is also marked by things like traffic builders and action alleys. These have to be developed without any idea for where they're going to go. These prototypes can and could be built anywhere in the world. What Walmart cares about are internal connectivities and relative locations between things on the interior. The outer part of the building, or the crust, is then left to be adaptable to the particularities of its context. These local adaptations might include different entrance locations or signage, but also the vertical walls of the exterior have one of 8 aesthetic motifs. These are Main Street, Alpine, Industrial, Coastal, Ranch, Colonial, Mission, and Mediterranean.
So the interiors are relatively fixed and the outside is malleable to the external requirements and added amenities of the building. The construction of the building is designed to be as flexible as possible for as little cost as possible. And to do that, it borrows from warehouse construction to make this happen. While the bulk of the building is built like a traditional warehouse, some special elements are tacked on, like small interventions that make it more store-like for people.
Often, the outer walls are made of reinforced CMU blocks or tilt-up concrete for these outer layers. The tilt-up process is more affordable than steel frame exteriors and shaves 1 or 2 months off the construction timeline. Unlike prefabricated construction, tilt-up wall sections are poured in place where casting frames and rebar are laid on a flat surface. A crane then comes and props them into place.
These outer surfaces are then supplemented on their exterior with sections made of insulated panels or more masonry or ephes, which is like a synthetic stucco. But these are really just tacked on to what is largely a giant CMU box.
The structure inside is steel, with long spans of what are called open web joists. These are a kind of built-up small truss that have a number of ideal qualities that we'll talk about after going through some terminology. But their main advantage has to do with their long span with a minimal amount of weight, which means fewer columns and thus more flexible interior space. The joist itself is made up of simple elements, largely steel angles and bent rods. The angles make up the chords, top and bottom, while the rods make up the webs. The joist is tapered on the ends, with the top chord extending to where it sits on either a column or the outer wall. These are all welded together to create a strong miniature truss that can span dozens of feet. The joists are arranged in parallel directions. The ones that line up with the columns are called column joists, and the ones that run perpendicular to the primary direction are called joist girders. These carry the load from a number of joists. Bridging connects the joists at intermediate points to keep them from buckling. These are topped with corrugated metal decking, which either has a layer of concrete on top or a set of insulated panels. Then there's a membrane of some sort, likely TPO, a single-ply rubber sheet. The roof is punctured with lots of skylights, which help bring daylight into such a vast space. Walmart has been one of the few big box retailers who believe that daylight could improve the shopping experience. The open web joists hold lines of lights to supplement the light coming from those skylights. The tall ceiling helps regulate temperatures and ensure evenness in the lighting. The taller the ceiling, the fewer the amount of fixtures and energy needed to cover a certain area with light. Speaking of energy, that's another way of understanding the scale of Walmart's operation. The company uses 29,000 gigawatt hours of electricity per year. That's enough to power 21 million homes. And this underscores the importance of the kinds of built environment that Walmart is producing.
But more generally, it's just a call to pay more attention to these kinds of spaces which we frequent. Not only are we in them all the time, they affect us directly in ways that we should pay attention to. There's also a vast network of spaces that are designed and we don't even see them, but they're significantly important to how our lives work. And I hope that this primer helps pave the way for further understanding of Walmart, spaces of retail in general, and the built environment at large. Much of the research for this video came from Jesse Le Cavier's book, The Rule of Logistics, Walmart, and Architecture of Fulfillment. If this stuff interests you, I highly recommend that book.
While researching Walmart, I came across an intriguing video titled The Incredible Logistics of Grocery Stores by Wendover Productions that I think you might like. What caught my attention was that this particular version was available on the streaming service Nebula and offered more content than the one found on YouTube. I highly recommend checking it out, as Nebula serves as a haven for educational video essays created by beloved creators like Sam of Wendover, alongside other notable channels such as Johnny Harris, Not Just Bikes, City Beautiful, and many more. One of the benefits of Nebula is that creators can share videos early, including companion content like my extended interviews and building tours, without the constraints of the YouTube algorithm. With thousands of ad-free videos like these on Nebula, is truly a treasure trove for knowledge seekers. Nebula offers exclusive originals and entertaining game shows like Jetlag, and they provide courses where your favorite creators share behind-the-scenes insight into their creative process, giving you a unique opportunity to learn from talents like The Friday Checkout, Foreign, and Patrick Willems. To gain access to this world of hidden gems, simply click the link in the description. The subscription fee is $2.50 per month when you sign up for a year, and not only when you unlock the secret treasures of your beloved YouTube creators, but you'll also support me in producing content that delves into the fascinating realm of the built environment.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Leave a comment with your thoughts on the architecture of Walmart. Videos come out every other Thursday, and while you're waiting for the next to drop, check out some of these others. See you over there.